Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Across the world today, there are lands where holding a Qur'an is treated like holding a weapon, where whispering La ilaha illa Allah is considered rebellion, where a simple prayer whispered before sleep can be punished more severely than a crime, and where Muslim families must choose between staying silent or staying alive. In this documentary, we enter the hidden world of believers whose only offense is that they love Allah, they honor the Qur'an, and they refuse to let tyranny erase their faith. These are not stories from centuries ago. These are the stories of our brothers and sisters right now, in our own time, in nations where Islam is treated as a threat that must be crushed before it grows. Imagine waking up every morning unsure if today is the day the government knocks on your door. Imagine hiding your Qur'an behind the ceiling or burying it in the yard, because being caught with it means prison without trial. Imagine teaching your child Surah Al-Fatiha in whispers because even the walls have ears. And imagine knowing that your entire family could vanish, simply because you held onto the book that guides your soul. For many Muslims, this is not imagination. This is their reality. In this video, we explore the pain, the courage, and the unbreakable resilience of Muslim families living under hostile rule. Families who pray in darkness so their light will not be seen. Mothers who memorize the Qur'an because owning a copy could get them imprisoned. Fathers who disappear in the night because someone reported hearing them recite far. Children who grow up never seeing a masjid, never hearing the adhan, yet they somehow know that Allah is still with them. We look at 7 nations where persecution is not a headline, but a daily battle. Countries where the state tries to control what a Muslim eats, how they dress, how they think, what they read, and even whether they are allowed to speak Arabic. Countries where Islamic names are replaced, Islamic practices are criminalized, and Islamic identity is treated as a threat to national loyalty. But the question is, why? Why does the Qur'an frighten tyrants? Why does Allahu Akbar shake the hearts of oppressors? Why do the words of a book so peaceful become so dangerous in the eyes of dictator? Because the Qur'an awakens hearts. It liberates minds. It teaches that no ruler is greater than Allah, no power is absolute except His, and no human being has the right to enslave another. And so, in the eyes of oppressors, a Muslim who knows the Qur'an is a Muslim who cannot be controlled. This documentary is not just to expose injustice. It is to remind us of something deeper. It reminds us that the freedom you and I enjoy, the ability to pray openly, to walk to a masjid, to recite Qur'an on a phone, to wear hijab, to grow a beard, to hold Islamic books, is a blessing. A gift from Allah that many of our brothers and sisters would risk their lives to taste even once. It reminds us of our duty to care, our duty to pray for them, our duty to speak for them when they cannot speak, our duty to appreciate the faith we sometimes take lightly, and our duty to never let convenience make us forget sacrifice. This is not a story of defeat. It is a story of survival, of spiritual victory, of a flame that governments have tried to extinguish for decades, but still burns with the strength of Allahu Nur as Samawati wal Ard. Light upon light. Welcome to Killed for the Qur'an, how Muslim families survive deadly persecution in 7 hostile nations. Welcome to a journey of truth, courage, and unshakable faith. I am Mallam JIJI from Wisdom from the Minbar, and today we speak for those whose voices the world tries to silence. Bismillah, let us begin. When faith becomes a crime. The reality of being Muslim in hostile nations. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. To understand the depth of persecution Muslims face in some parts of the world, you must first understand what it truly means when faith itself becomes a crime. Not because someone committed an offense, not because they harmed another soul, but simply because they believed in Allah, opened a Qur'an, or whisper prayer. In certain nations across the globe, Islam is treated not as a religion, not as a way of life, not as a personal belief, but as a political threat that must be erased before it spreads. In these nations, a Muslim does not wake up thinking about school, work, or normal daily tasks. A Muslim wakes up thinking, Will my prayer be heard today, or will it be my last? This is the psychological world of Muslims in hostile territories, places where even the sound of a Quranic verse can bring fear of imprisonment, torture, or a disappearance. Imagine living in a society where every part of your Islamic identity is monitored. The names you give your children, the clothes you wear, the language you speak, the people you associate with, the messages you send, even the expression on your face when you hear something about religion. Everything becomes evidence. Everything becomes suspicious. Everything becomes risky. In these nations, Islam is not banned with large announcements. It is suffocated slowly. The masjid becomes a museum. The adhan becomes a memory. Religious gatherings are replaced with state surveillance. Qur'ans become contraband items, treated with the same caution as illegal weapons. A beard becomes a sign of rebellion. A hijab becomes an act of defiance. A Jannah-themed wallpaper on your phone becomes enough to call you in for questioning. And every believer becomes a suspect, guilty before proven innocent. There are Muslims who cannot say, Assalamu alaikum, outside their homes. Muslims who cannot fast publicly during Ramadan because the state forces them to eat to prove loyalty. Muslims who must celebrate Eid in silence, with no gatherings, no khutbah, no takbirat, no open joy, only the quiet beating of the heart that whispers, Ya Allah, accept from us. And yet, even under such crushing oppression, the human heart still reaches for its Lord. Secret circles form in living rooms. Underground schools teach children the alphabet through Quranic verses. Families memorize the Quran together because owning a physical copy could expose them. Mothers teach their children how to pray using hand gestures because praying openly could lead to punishment. Fathers dig tiny spaces under floorboards to hide a single Quran wrapped in cloth. And young people find hope by writing verses on scraps of paper, committing them to memory before burning the paper to avoid being caught. Every day for these families is a test of courage. Every night is a negotiation between fear and faith. Do they stay silent and safe, or stay Muslim and risk everything? And yet, more often than not, they choose Allah. They choose identity. They choose the faith that gives them strength even in the darkest conditions. For many Muslims in these nations, Islam is not a religion they practice. It is a fire they protect, a whisper they guard, a light they refuse to let the world extinguish. One of the most heartbreaking realities of these places is the silence surrounding them. Their stories do not reach global media. Their tears are not broadcast. Their fears are not documented. Their struggles are not known by the majority of the Ummah, because their oppressors do not want the world to know. And so their suffering continues in shadows, behind closed doors, behind state propaganda, and behind fear that keeps the Ummah unaware. But despite the silence, their faith continues to speak. And what it says is powerful. It says, Islam cannot be crushed. Faith cannot be erased. Identity cannot be rewritten by force. And Allah will always raise believers in the places where oppressors try the hardest to destroy belief. This chapter sets the foundation for this documentary. Because before we explore the reasons behind persecution, before we explore the stories of families and the struggles of prisoners, we must first understand the environment they live in. Environments where believing in Allah is considered a threat, where carrying the Quran is seen as rebellion, and where practicing Islam is treated like a crime. Yet even in the face of this injustice, the faith of these Muslims is stronger than the chains placed upon them. And that is why their story must be told. The Quran in chains. Why oppressors fear Islamic scripture. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. If you want to understand why some governments fear Muslims, you must ask a deeper question. Why do they fear the Quran? Why do dictators treat this book, a book recited by children, memorized by millions, and revered by billions, as though it were a weapon capable of overthrowing nations? Why does a scripture full of mercy, guidance, and wisdom cause panic in the hearts of tyrants? The truth is simple. Oppressors do not fear Muslims. They fear the power that comes from Muslims who understand the Quran. They fear the transformation it brings. They fear the independence it inspires. They fear the courage it unlocks. Because a believer connected to the Quran cannot be mentally colonized. He cannot be spiritually controlled. She cannot be enslaved by any system. The Quran gives dignity, and dignity weakens tyranny. Throughout history, oppressive rulers have always targeted scriptures that awaken the soul. Pharaoh persecuted Musa because he carried revelation. The Quraysh fought the Prophet Muhammad because the Quran was liberating slaves, uniting tribes, and breaking the chains of false gods. Colonial powers banned Quran schools because they feared an educated Muslim population. And today, modern governments repeat the same strategies because the Quran still carries the same power it did 1,400 years ago. So why do they fear this book? They fear the Quran because it teaches that no ruler is absolute. Only Allah is. They fear the Quran because it demands justice and condemns oppression. They fear the Quran because it commands believers to stand firm, to speak the truth, to be disciplined, and to resist corruption. They fear the Quran because it nurtures hearts that cannot be bought, corrupted, or intimidated. In some countries, simply possessing a Quran is treated like possessing classified enemy documents. Printing Qurans requires state approval. Owning multiple Qurans is suspicious. Traveling with a Quran attracts questioning. Teaching Quranic Arabic is considered extremism. Even listening to Quran recitation is treated as radical behavior. Imagine a world where Surah Al-Fatiha whispered at night is considered dangerous. Imagine a world where a child learning the alphabet from Surah Ikhlas is considered misguided. Imagine a world where the sound of Quranic recitation is not a source of peace, but a sound that makes governments send agents to your door. This is the reality in nations where Islam is oppressed. The Quran has become a symbol of resistance, even when no resistance is planned. Oppressors fear the Quran because it awakens a sleeping population. A population without Quran is a population that obeys without questioning. But a population raised with Quranic truth becomes a population that thinks, analyzes, criticizes, and seeks justice. And this terrifies tyrants. The Quran is banned not because it promotes violence, but because it promotes freedom. It dignifies the slave. It humbles the king. It raises the poor. It corrects the rich. It exposes corruption. It destroys arrogance. It refuses to bow to any government. So what does a tyrant do? He bans it. He rewrites it. He restricts it. He criminalizes it. In certain countries today, Quranic schools are demolished. Imams are forced to preach state-approved sermons. Children are taken away to erase their Islamic identity. And families who try to teach Quran at home risk imprisonment or disappearance. Yet despite all of this, the Quran continues to spread. Not through books, not through storefronts, but through hearts. When you ban a book, you usually kill its message. But when you ban the Quran, you strengthen its message. Because Muslims respond by memorizing it. They hide it in their hearts when they can no longer hide it in their homes. They teach it in secret circles, whispering verses that carry more weight than any weapon. There are places today where mothers teach their children the Quran with the lights off, in complete silence, trusting that Allah hears even the quietest breath of faith. There are fathers who recite Quran in their minds while working, afraid to move their lips. There are young Muslims who memorize entire surahs in secret, repeating them mentally thousands of times so they will never forget. Qurans have been banned. Qurans have been burnt. Qurans have been seized. But the one place tyrants cannot reach is the hearts of believers who carry the words of Allah as light within them. The Quran survived the destruction of libraries, the burning of masjids, the collapse of empires, the rise of dictators, and the brutality of modern regimes. And despite every historical attempt to silence it, it still stands today as the most memorized, most preserved, and most recited book on earth. And so, the question is not why oppressors fear the Quran. The real question is why they do not understand that they can never destroy it. Because for every Quran they ban, 10 more are memorized. For every page they tear, a believer writes it back from memory. For every masjid they close, a home becomes a masjid. For every imam they imprison, 1,000 new voices rise. This is the book that Allah promised to protect. This is the book that lives in the hearts of the Ummah. And this is the book that tyrants fear because they cannot defeat it. This is chapter 2. And the journey continues deeper into the heart of persecution and faith. Families torn apart, secret prayers, hidden schools, and underground mosques. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Behind every statistic, every report, and every headline about persecuted Muslims, there's a family, a father, a mother, children, elders, ordinary people living extraordinary struggles simply because they refuse to abandon the faith of their hearts. In hostile nations, persecution does not target individuals alone. It targets entire families, entire communities, entire generations. It breaks households. It splits bloodlines. It tries to erase Islam from the roots by striking the family tree itself. Imagine a home where the living room is no longer a place of comfort, but a place of strategy. A room where families gather not to eat or talk, but to whisper plans about how they will pray tonight without being heard. In some of these countries, evening conversations sound like secret missions. Who will watch the window? Who will recite quietly? Who will keep an ear out for footsteps? Because even a single moment of prayer, a single bowing of the head, can be enough to destroy the entire household. There are families who pray far before sunrise and Isha long after midnight just to avoid suspicion. They stand in the darkest corner of the house, away from windows, away from walls shared with neighbors, away from any shadows that might look like religious movement. Some pray sitting, others pray lying down, not out of disability, but out of fear. They whisper every word. They shorten every recitation. Even the sound of Allahu Akbar becomes a dangerous declaration in a world designed to silence faith. But prayer is only one part of the struggle. Teaching Islam becomes even more complicated. In many of these nations, Qur'an schools have been demolished or turned into state-controlled propaganda centers. Children are forced to attend government programs that erase their language, rewrite their history, and strip away every Islamic symbol. So parents are left with one of the hardest decisions of their lives. Do they let their children grow up without Islamic identity, or do they teach them secretly and risk everything? And so, underground Islamic schools are born. Hidden classrooms in basements, storage rooms, barns, forests, and abandoned buildings. In these makeshift madrasas, children sit in circles, learning Surah al-Fatiha, learning how to say Bismillah, learning the names of Allah, learning how to make wudu using droplets of water because running taps would make noise. These are schools where the blackboard is a piece of cardboard. The Quran pages are handwritten, and the illumination comes from a single flashlight placed under a cloth to hide the glow. Every lesson is a risk. Every recitation is a sacrifice. Every child becomes a witness to courage. And just as families create secret schools, communities create underground mosques. Not mosques with domes or minarets, but mosques made of silence and shadows. A spare room behind a locked door becomes a masjid. An empty garage becomes a masjid. A basement with mattresses covering the walls to suppress sound becomes a masjid. These places may have no carpets, no calligraphy, no microphone, no imam wearing a traditional robe. But what they have is more powerful: sincerity, unity, and a level of faith capable of shaking mountains. There are communities that meet once a week, traveling separately so as not to attract attention. They gather before dawn, pray together in a silent line, then disperse before the world wakes up. Even the khutbah is whispered. Even the dua is made in silence. And yet, these gatherings strengthen hearts more than loud Friday sermons ever could. Because faith that survives in fear becomes faith that cannot be broken. But with every risk comes a cost. Families are often torn apart. A father may be taken for owning a Qur'an. A mother may be arrested for teaching her children to pray. Older children may be separated from their parents and placed into re-education programs designed to wash Islam out of their souls. Young girls may be forced to remove their hijab and adopt names that hide their Muslim identity. Boys may be pressured into rejecting their faith to avoid harsh punishment. Imagine a child returning home from school, unable to recognize the words, Assalamu alaikum. Imagine a father returning from prison, unable to find the Quran he once hid in the ceiling because authorities have searched the home. Imagine a mother crying silently because her daughter's hijab has been forcibly removed by the state and replaced with a uniform designed to erase identity. This is not fiction. This is the daily reality for Muslim families in hostile nations. And yet, despite all of this, the strength of the Muslim family remains unmatched. When one parent is taken, the other continues the mission. When Islamic books are confiscated, verses are rewritten from memory. When children are separated, they carry in their hearts the softness of a mother who whispered Qur'an into their ears before sleep. When mosques are closed, every home becomes a masjid. When the world tries to erase the family protects the faith. The story of these families is not a story of destruction. It is a story of spiritual resistance. A story of mothers who become teachers, fathers who become imams, children who become bearers of the Quran. A story of unity forged under pressure and of faith strengthened under oppression. A story that proves one unshakable truth. When Islam enters a home, no oppression can remove it. Mothers of the Ummah, women who risk everything to protect Islamic identity. They say when a nation wants to destroy a people, they begin with the women, because women are the carriers of identity, the shapers of culture, and the teachers of the next generation. And in hostile nations where Muslims are hunted for their faith, this truth becomes painfully clear. For every banned Quran, every demolished masjid, and every imprisoned imam, there's often a Muslim woman standing quietly behind the scenes, trying to hold her family's Islam together in the shadows of fear. In many of these nations, simply wearing a hijab is considered an act of rebellion. Mothers walk the streets with uncovered heads not because they want to, but because soldiers stand at every corner watching for any symbol of Islam. Yet inside their homes, behind closed curtains, they whisper Quranic verses to their children, sowing the seeds of faith into young hearts even when the law says those seeds must never grow. A mother wakes her son at dawn, but not with the call of an open adhan. She taps him gently, pointing to the floor where a prayer mat is already hidden beneath a rug. She cannot let him recite Suratul Fatiha loudly. The walls have ears. The neighbors are afraid to keep secrets. But she teaches him anyway, line by line, her voice trembling, her eyes scanning the door. She knows that if the wrong person hears them pray, the consequences could be brutal. Yet she also knows that without this, her child might grow up never knowing the sweetness of talking to Allah. In some regions, Qurans are illegal. Ownership can lead to arrest. So Muslim mothers memorize entire surahs, carrying the Quran in their hearts when they cannot carry it in their hands. They whisper verses while cooking. They recite Ayatul Kursi while rocking their babies to sleep. They teach their daughters the words of Allah the same way other mothers teach lullabies, softly, quickly, carefully, hoping the children learn before the soldiers come knocking. There are stories of mothers who bury their Quran in the ground at night, wrapped in plastic, to protect it during daytime raids. They dig it up only to teach a few lines to their children before hiding it again. Some copy pages by hand on scraps of paper, passing them secretly through trusted friends like priceless treasure. These are not the stories on the news. These are the quiet miracles of Muslim motherhood. And then there are the mothers who face a fear more terrifying than arrest, the fear of losing their children to forced assimilation. Some nations take Muslim children and place them in state schools designed to erase Islam from their identity. A mother stands at the bus stop, watching her child leave each morning, praying that when he comes home, he still remembers who he is. She fears the day he returns with new beliefs forced into his heart, told that his religion is backward, dangerous, unfit. So every night, she counterteaches him. Where the state says Islam must die, she teaches him Islam must live. These women are the silent guardians of the Ummah. They do not stand in front of cameras. They are not quoted in international reports. Their bravery is quiet, hidden, and constant. They cook, clean, protect, teach, and pray, all while carrying the enormous weight of their family's faith on their shoulders. They are the unseen Mujahidat, fighting battles with no weapons except patience and the remembrance of Allah. And when governments outlaw hijab, these mothers sew hidden inner scars for their daughters. When soldiers raid homes to confiscate religious books, mothers hide Qur'ans inside mattresses or in flour bags. When the adhan is banned, mothers hum the melody under their breath so that their babies grow up recognizing the rhythm of Allahu Akbar. They risk everything not because they love danger, but because they love Allah. They know that Islam preserved in one child's heart today can blossom into a community tomorrow. They know that tyrants come and go, but a child who memorizes Surah Al-Ikhlas becomes a believer who will stand firm long after the oppressor is gone. These mothers are the proof that Islam survives not only through grand battles or heroic leaders, but through the gentle, stubborn love of women who refuse to let their families forget Allah. Nations have tried to erase Islam for centuries, but they always fail. Why? Because they underestimate the power of a Muslim mother. Her womb carries children, but her heart carries the Ummah. Her voice teaches the Qur'an, but her courage keeps it alive. Her sacrifice is unseen, but her reward is with the Lord of the worlds. This chapter is dedicated to every Muslim mother who fights silently so her children can say, even in the darkest nations, La ilaha illallah. This is wisdom from the Minbar, and I am Mallam JIJI, reminding you that the strength of the Ummah has always begun in the home, in the heart, and in the steadfast courage of our mothers. Shackles and shadows. The Muslim prisoners of faith. There are prisons in this world built not for criminals, but for believers. Cells designed not to punish wrongdoing, but to silence faith. And inside these cold rooms, behind metal bars and concrete walls, thousands of Muslims sit in darkness. Their only crime is saying, Allah is my Lord. These are the prisoners of faith, and their stories echo across the Ummah like silent screams waiting to be heard. In hostile nations, a beard can be a charge. A hijab can be evidence. A Quran can be a weapon, not in the hands of the believer, but in the hands of the oppressor who fears the power of guidance, unity, and truth. Dictators know that you cannot control a people who kneel only to God, so they target anyone who refuses to bow to them. The first people they arrest are the imams, the voices of the community, the hearts of the mosque. When an imam teaches Tawhid, it shakes the throne of tyranny. When he teaches justice, it exposes corruption. And when he teaches patience, he prevents the people from breaking. So they drag him away in the middle of the night, blindfolded, handcuffed, and ripped from his family. His wife cries silently. His children cling to the doorframe. But the soldiers show no mercy. They know that removing one imam can silence thousands of souls. Next, they imprison the fathers, teachers, activists, and scholars. Anyone who teaches Islam becomes a threat. Anyone who gathers youth becomes suspicious. Anyone who refuses to abandon the Quran is treated as an enemy of the state. Some are taken to secret prisons where sunlight has not touched the walls for years. Others are thrown into overcrowded cells, left without trial, without charges, without hope. Families wait outside the gates for months or years, holding photos, begging for answers, but the guards only shrug. In some cases, the prisoners exist only in whispers, no records, no phone calls, no letters. They simply disappear into the system like smoke. And inside these prisons, torture is not rare, it is routine. Believers are beaten for refusing to denounce Islam. They are starved for refusing to say forbidden slogans. They are isolated for daring to pray. In some detention centers, the guards check security cameras and break into cells the moment they see a prisoner standing in prayer. The goal is to break the spirit, not just the body. But they fail. They always fail. Deep inside the darkness, Muslims continue to pray, even without water, even without space, even without being able to stand. A man in solitary confinement makes wudu with the moisture of his breath. A woman prays with her eyes when her hands are chained. A young man whispers Surah Al-Mulk into the cracks in the wall, hoping another prisoner will hear it and memorize it. These are acts of worship the world will never witness, but Allah sees them clearly, and the angels record them with honor. One prisoner was asked, "Why do you keep praying when they beat you every time you bow?" He replied, "Because every time they beat me, the pain fades. But every time I pray, the reward remains forever." This is the strength of the Muslim prisoner, a strength that terrifies the oppressor. And then there are the families left behind. Wives who wait for years without knowing if their husbands are alive. Children who keep a prayer mat next to their bed, hoping their father will return and pray with them again. Mothers who replay the last phone call in their minds, afraid to forget the sound of their child's voice. These families serve a sentence of their own, a sentence of waiting, hoping, and surviving. Yet despite the fear, the silence, and the pain, something miraculous happens. The more they imprison Muslims, the more Islam spreads. The more they hide the Qur'an, the more it is memorized. The more they torture the believers, the stronger their iman becomes. History has seen this pattern again and again. From Pharaoh imprisoning the believers of Musa, to Quraysh torturing early Muslims in Mecca, to modern regimes locking away entire communities. The result is always the same. Oppression tries to break Islam, and Islam rises even higher. These prisoners of faith remind us that chains cannot hold back the truth. Walls cannot block the mercy of Allah. And one believer in a cell can be more powerful than a dictator in a palace. When the world forgets them, Allah does not. When the records erase them, the angels write their names. When tyrants think they have won, the day of judgment will expose every injustice. So this chapter is a tribute to every Muslim who sits behind bars for no reason other than loving their Lord. Their patience is a lesson. Their tears are testimony. Their silence is a sermon. And their courage is a reminder that faith is the one thing that no oppressor has ever been able to bury. This is wisdom from the Minbar, and I am Mallam JIJI, reminding you that the prisoners of faith may be locked behind walls, but their spirits stand taller than every throne of oppression. The light that cannot be extinguished. How Islam survives against all odds. Every generation of oppressors believed they could silence Islam. Every tyrant thought he was strong enough, powerful enough, brutal enough to dim the light of Allah. But history has taught one lesson with absolute certainty. The light that comes from heaven cannot be extinguished by the hands of men. In every hostile nation, where Muslims are hunted, watched, forbidden, or silenced, you would expect Islam to weaken. You would expect people to give up, to surrender, to forget. But the opposite happens. The more Islam is attacked, the deeper it sinks into the heart. The more the Quran is banned, the faster it is memorized. The more the adhan is silenced, the louder it echoes in the soul. This is because faith is not built on buildings or borders. Faith is built on conviction. And conviction is something no regime, no government, no army has ever been able to control. Look at the pages of history. Look at the Ummah's story. Look at every era where Muslims were oppressed, from the early days of Mecca to the darkest corners of today, and you will see the same miracle repeating itself. When Islam is pushed into the shadows, it shines even brighter. The Quran itself tells us that people once tried to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths, with their laws, with their force. But Allah promised that He will perfect His light, even if the disbelievers hate it. So oppression does not weaken Islam. It exposes its power. In the countries where Qur'ans are burned, Muslims hide verses in their hearts. In the nations where masjids are demolished, believers turn their homes into sacred spaces. In the prisons where prayer is banned, Muslims worship with their eyes, with their tears, with their unbreakable hope. And outside those cells, outside those borders, the Ummah watches and learns that Islam is not a religion of comfort. It is a religion of resilience. A religion of standing tall, even when the world tries to crush you. A religion that has survived empires, colonizers, invaders, dictators, armies, massacres, propaganda, bans, threats, and lies. Yet it still stands untouched, unmoved, undefeated. Why? Because Islam does not belong to any nation. It does not rely on any government. It does not need permission to exist. Islam grows in silence. It grows in suffering. It grows in places where people least expect it. Ask yourself, how does a religion that is banned in classrooms still end up being memorized by millions of children? How does a scripture that is outlawed still become the most recited book in the world? How do oppressed Muslims, with no voice, no rights, no freedom, still inspire the global Ummah with their steadfastness? It is because Islam is protected by the one who revealed it. No worldly force can erase what Allah preserves. No dictator can change what Allah has written. No government can undo what Allah has destined. Every time a Qur'an is burned, 100 more are printed. Every time a masjid is shut down, 1,000 hearts open to Islam. Every time a Muslim is oppressed, millions wake up and say, "This Ummah must stand together." This is the unbreakable cycle of faith. Oppression tries to bury Islam, but every grain of sand becomes a seed. And then comes the greatest miracle of all. Islam spreads in the very nations that try to erase it. We have seen the children of prisoners become Hafiz. We have seen the grandchildren of tortured Muslims become scholars. We have seen entire civilizations collapse while Islam continued to rise from the ruins. Because Islam is not a flame that weakens in the wind. Islam is the fire that grows stronger when challenged. Islam is the light that does not flicker, even in storms. Islam is the truth that cannot be rewritten, redirected, or erased. And so, to every Muslim living under persecution, this chapter is your reminder. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. Your struggle is witnessed by Allah, recorded by angels, and honored by the entire Ummah. You are the proof that Islam survives not because of freedom, but because of faith. Not because of safety, but because of sacrifice. Not because of comfort, but because of courage. The light of Islam has outlived kings, kingdoms, and conquerors, and it will outlive every oppressor of today. This faith is not just surviving, it is thriving. Not just enduring, but expanding. Not just holding on, but rising higher than ever before. For the light of Allah is eternal, and no hand, no power, no army can ever put it out. This is wisdom from the Minbar. And I am Mallam JIJI, reminding you that Islam does not fall when the world turns dark. Islam is the light that breaks the darkness. Alhamdulillah, as we reach the end of this journey, the stories we've witnessed carry a message far deeper than fear, oppression, or sadness. They carry the reminder that faith cannot be killed, that the Qur'an cannot be buried, that Islam cannot be erased from a heart that knows its Lord. If persecution had the power to destroy Islam, it would have disappeared centuries ago. But here we are, the Ummah is still standing, still growing, still reciting the same Qur'an revealed over 1,400 years ago. In every corner of the world where governments try to silence Muslims, Allah creates hearts that refuse to give up. In every nation where mosques are demolished, Allah inspires homes to become secret masjids. In every region where the Qur'an is banned, Allah gives memory to children who carry surahs inside them like hidden treasure. And in every city where tyranny rises, Allah raises believers whose courage becomes a reminder that this faith will always belong to Him, not to political forces or earthly powers. The families you heard about today, the ones risking their lives for a single verse of the Qur'an, they are not weak. They are not broken. They're the living proof that Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. They're the carriers of a legacy that began in Mecca, when early Muslims were tortured for saying, "My Lord is Allah," yet they stood firm. Today, that same legacy continues through mothers teaching Qur'an in secret, fathers praying in the dark, and young people who refuse to give their hearts to anything but Allah. And now the question returns to us. What do we do with our freedom? What do we do with our Qur'ans? What do we do with our time, our knowledge, our platforms, our voices? Do we open the Qur'an daily, or does it gather dust? Do we pray with gratitude or with laziness? Do we support the oppressed, or do we scroll past their struggles like a passing headline? The suffering of persecuted Muslims is not only a test for them, it is a test for us, a test of compassion, a test of unity, a test of whether we will remember the oppressed as the Prophet commanded, a test of whether we will make dua for them, speak for them, and stand for them. We may not be able to stop governments. We may not be able to enter those hostile nations, but we can do something. We can raise awareness. We can pray sincerely. We can share their stories. We can keep their names alive, because silence is what the oppressors want, but remembrance is what Allah loves. And as we close, let us remember this final truth. The Quran has survived empires, kings, colonizers, dictators, and armies who tried to silence it. It still remains. It still spreads. It still enters hearts. And it will continue until the last day. Those who fight the Quran always fall. Those who protect it always rise. To all Muslims living under persecution, we say, you are not alone. Your Ummah hears you. Your tears are counted. Your patience is recorded. Your faith is honored in the heavens, even if the earth tries to hide you. May Allah protect you, reward you, and make your suffering a pathway to Jannah. This is Mallam JIJI from Wisdom from the Minbar. If this documentary touched your heart, then support this mission by liking, sharing, and commenting so that more people can learn the truth. Subscribe to join a growing community dedicated to knowledge, justice, spirituality, and the light of Islam. Until our next reminder, may Allah keep your heart firm, your steps guided, and your faith unshakable. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.